Welcome, Al-Mena, a new generation bringing new areas of our fellowship together with unity. All of our speakers are shared on our WhatsApp audio groups and speaker channels. The links will be dropped in the chat. If you are listening to this recording and need help, we have a way out that works. Please reach out and send us an email at ca.almina2026@gmail.com, and the crew will reach out and get back to you. We have invited today Tarek from Atlanta to share a message of depth and weight for 45 minutes. The floor is yours, Tarek. Welcome.
Thank you, Ahmed. Oh, I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous. My name is Tarek. Good to be here. Good to be with you. Um, well, this is a good looking group. I see faces I recognize. My buddy Young, good to see you, brother. Kieran, good to see you. Thank you for coming. This is a different talk for me. Uh, I'm fortunate and blessed that I get to do this a good amount, and I I was born in Damascus, Syria, in the Middle East, and so when Eunice reached out to me about this group and giving this talk, it had an effect on me. It was going to allow me the opportunity to share parts of my story that I don't get to share very often. They just they don't come up for me. Occasionally, when I'm doing a retreat or a workshop, maybe I have more time, but not when I'm giving the talk. Um, and so it is an honor to be here and a privilege to be here. A power greater than myself separated me from crack cocaine and alcohol and a host of other substances on the morning of November 5th in 2007. Because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, the program of Cocaine Anonymous, the fellowships within both of those programs, the big book, the steps, sponsorship, a host of so many things. But I think what might be the most important is the people I've decided to surround myself with over these last 18 and a half years. Individuals that are excited about spirituality. They're excited about diving deeper into this 12-step way of life, investigating the spiritual realm and evolving their conceptions of God. All of those reasons, I found it for all of those reasons, I found it unnecessary to use cocaine or alcohol or any mind-altering substance to treat any degree of psychological pain that I am experiencing. And for that gift that was given to me spontaneously and for free, because it all started with separation. That's where the gift started. I can't forget that. And because of those wonderful gifts that I listed, I mean, all of those are gifts as well. But that miracle of separation, I have a debt to pay. I'm the only one that can pay the debt off, and my debt's with God. And I know some people that's not part of their belief system around it, but for me, it always has to be a part of my belief system because I think the more I stay in touch with that gift and that debt, it impacts the way I try to live my life. I'm going to live my life in appreciation for this wonderful gift that I received, and grace played a huge role, but mercy played another huge role. Compassion. And so grace, divine intervention given to a human being for their regeneration. Was that part of what happened? Absolutely. But the definition of mercy, the compassionate treatment bestowed upon a human being who is in distress. And on November 4th, 2007, I was in a great deal of distress, and God took mercy on me and he separated me. I think the grace came into play as I worked the 12 steps and I began to have this willingness that was not of me. That's just my thoughts on it. I don't know if that's true or not. So it seems to be good enough for today. I um I think back over the course of my life, and I think about how growing up in a Muslim home and being I'm sure there's quite a few people on this call that understand this, that when you grow up in that type of culture, what goes on in the house stays in the house. But what goes on, what you show the rest, and this is the actually I take that back. This is probably very common in many cultures, not just a Middle Eastern culture, but maybe it's a little bit increased in the culture I grew up in. But what goes on in the house stays in the house, and you will lie, you will tell lies, you will fabricate lies to make yourself appear better than you are in the community. And so um, I remember the first my first memory in my body, in my physical body, was I believe I was in my playpen, and my mother came running into the room. Now my parents were arranged marriage. My dad was Palestinian, my mom is Syrian. He was 22 years older than her, so they were an arranged marriage. So she's 20 years old, he's 42 years old, and I must have been a year, maybe, I don't know. But she comes running into the room, throws herself on the bed, starts crying hysterically. And then there's this figure of this man who stands over her. He's towering over her while she's on the bed, screaming at her. Years later, decades later, I would ask my mom about this memory. And she said that, my father would come home from work and drink, and then he would lose control of the amount he drank. And they were supposed to go to a play, to go to the theater, to go out to dinner, whatever. I don't know which one was that night. I've been told it was they had a theater play tickets. They wouldn't go. He'd rip up the tickets in front of her. And so this is my first memory of, as I come into this world. And then I grew up in the alcoholic home. I had a very violent father, physically, emotionally, verbally abusive man. And the home was in turmoil. And he was a successful man in that part of the world. So I was born in 1976. In 1978, we moved to Karachi, Pakistan, and my father worked for the United Arab Airlines, I believe, at the time. And as his drinking was forcing decisions in his life, and his sisters had immigrated to the United States in the 1960s. So they set it up for us to come to Detroit, Michigan in 1980. And that didn't work out too well. And we moved down south to Atlanta, Georgia. And I grew up in Atlanta. I left Atlanta about 5, 6 years ago. I'm in Birmingham, which is not far from Atlanta. And so my parents immigrated to the United States. My dad brings $300,000, which is, if you adjust for inflation, $300,000 in today's money is probably close to $900,000. And my dad loses all of it. He tries to open up a Middle East bakery. He tries to open up a Middle East restaurant. He tries to do a printing shop. He loses all of it because of his drinking, and he's taking it out on the family. And I remember when my brother and I would break rules or we would get in trouble, he would whip us with his belt, and then he would stomp on us while we were on the staircase. And then he was being abusive with my mom, and my grandmother came to the United States with us, and he was abusive with her. And then he takes a job working at the bakery from midnight until morning. And you imagine a successful man in another country already has a drinking problem, loses all the money, and now what happens? It snowballs. What does this little young boy do? This little boy who grows into a young boy, 6, 7, 8 years old, he he starts to make connections, right? When my dad drinks, something bad typically happens. And so I start to realize our home is in turmoil because of the alcohol. It has something to do with it. The screaming in the middle of the night, the flesh hitting flesh in the middle of the night, furniture breaking in the middle of the night, doors slamming shut in the middle of the night, my mom pulling her hair and slapping her face in the middle of the night. I can't take this anymore. I'm leaving. And I remember my grandmother, my tete would come into the bedroom and she would shield my brother and I because of what was going on in the house. So I'm having all of these psychologically wounding experiences happening in my life. I've made the connection into alcohol. My mom says she can't take anymore. So she packs a bag and she leaves. And me and my brother are trying to stop her from running out the door, and she leaves us. And we don't know why mom's just left. And now we're just here with our grandmother and my father. And we go into the dining room and we pull these chairs from the dining table. We put them by the window. We lived in an apartment complex. So when the entrance to the apartment complex is right next to this window. And so me and my brother would sit by the window all night, waiting for mom to come back. And sometimes she would come back that night, and sometimes she'd come back the next day, and sometimes she would come back a couple of days later. And what does the little boy do? He develops an idea, a story. I'm not good enough. What's wrong with me? Why is my mom not here to protect me? Something's wrong. I'm defective. I'm unworthy. All of these stories begin to develop, and so a few years. Those memories are probably as long as I can remember, 4, 5, 6, 7. I mean, we lived in that apartment complex. I was 5 years, 4.5, 5 years old. So this went on for 3 or 4 years, and at the same time, I was sexually abused by a family member. And so this young human being is going through all these psychologically wounding experiences, and he's made the connection that alcohol has something to do with all of these problems. Not what happened to me, but alcohol has something to do with, well, why my home is in shambles, why my mom leaves, why we walk on eggshells around my dad, why it's so nerve-wracking when he comes home and he goes into the room and then he comes back out and he's transformed into this other person. What is going on? This kid is restless. He's uneasy. He's easily annoyed. He's bored. He is lacking direction. He doesn't fit in. You know, we became very westernized very quick. And at some point, all of our Arab friends were telling my parents that we need to take our shahada, we need to go to the mosque, and we need to do this. And my mom is not a very religious woman, but my grandmother is. And so my mom tries to take us to the mosque, and we're two westernized kids. We get ostracized. They don't want us at the mosque. They're talking about us under their breath. Other adults are talking about these two little, Western white boys, with their Nikes and their polo shirts, and they don't belong here. And I never made the connection that it had anything to do with God. What I made the connection with was organized religion. I didn't want anything to do with it. And then it gets worse because I was ostracized from the mosque. So I tried to join the church. I tried to go to Young Life, which is an organization for young people in the church, and you go to Bible study, and they ostracized me there because of my name. I don't even look like Tarek for some people. From people that grew in the Middle East, they understand that there's a lot of fair-skinned, red-haired people from Syria. Okay, we know why that is. But when you're in the United States and you're in the deep South, the southern United States, and you're in the very Southern Baptist part of the world, and they see your name as Tarek Khalil, and you don't look like it, and you get introduced to your friends and their families and their extended circle of friends, they look at you very strange. They look at you like you don't belong. So based on all of this, I grew up in a very hostile world. The world was not a friendly place. Then something happened when I was 14 years old. When I was 14 years old, I took a drink and my life changed. I took a drink and the people's eyes started to change. The people that looked at me like I didn't belong, The people that looked at me and their eyes told me that don't we have enough friends, we don't need any more friends. Those people's eyes changed. And now their eyes are saying, we want to know you. You're worth knowing. Well, what happened? Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I had a profound alteration to my reaction to those situations. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I began to have a sudden and spectacular upheaval within myself. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I began to have a transformation. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, I began to have a personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from my insecurity. Somewhere between the second and the fifth drink, alcohol did for me what I could not do for myself. I had discovered the power of alcohol in that experience. And it was something that was going to become an important part of my life. I discovered it in the midst of excitement at a party, and it changed the entire experience. And so for me at 14 years old, academics were very important. Athletics were very important. I was a very good athlete. I was an all county athlete in in the United States. That's a big deal here. And I I didn't let the alcohol get in the way. I drank on the weekends. I lost control many times. When I drank more than I intended because I have the earmarks of alcoholism at that young age. But I did not let it get between me and those grades that I was making in school and the performance on the basketball court, because they defined that was my identity. It was the only thing that gave me any sense of self-worth. I couldn't talk about what was going on at home. Home was off limits. It was a very, very dark place. And so the only thing that gave me any type of status were these grades and this athletic prowess that I had developed. And so in 1996, 1995, I'm completely disconnected from my heritage at this point. But my grandmother, she was the ultimate example of spirituality for me. Um, this woman, she would do her salat all 5 times throughout the course of the day, and she lived with this tyrant of a son-in-law. She raised these two boys because my mom had to work 2 jobs to support us, and every time something bad happened, some set of circumstances that were unpleasant fell upon the family. My grandmother would have her prayer beads, and she would be practicing this practice called zikr, the remembrance of God, you know, and she would recite, over and over in Arabic, this is what God has written. This is what God has written. This is what God has written. It was the most extreme example of having absolute faith and trust in not only God, in whatever is unfolding in the moment is God. And that was my introduction to this idea of how this God works. And I'm very grateful for that, because sometimes I think there are people that I think God is love and light, and that's all he is. And what about the other stuff, the other half of reality that's not love and light? Does that mean it's the devil? Well, what if the devil is part of God? I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. I really don't know, nor do I don't care to be certain about it. I don't have a lot of interest in who created the world, nor do I have a lot of interest in where I'm going after this is over. What I'm interested in is what I'm doing here. What kind of person am I now? What am I to my 2 little boys, and to my partner and our home and the people that know me the best? Okay, that's what's important. The most important work I do is not in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous. It's within the walls of my home. And the irony, the paradox is, if I don't do the work in Alcoholics Anonymous and I don't do the work in Cocaine Anonymous, I got no home. I won't be very useful there. So it's just one of the many paradoxes that I have discovered in the spiritual way of life we call the 12 steps. Um, And so I wanted to, that was like a little bit of a sidebar there. I want to circle back to 1995, 1996 is when I got into music and I got into drugs, the hard drugs, the ecstasy. It's just so much fun for me because I talk in AA a lot. So I don't talk in CA as much as I used to. So now I get to talk about all the stuff I used to do. um, the LSD, the ecstasy, the smoking synthetic drugs and doing the synthetic drugs. There was a big drug called DMT. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. And I love smoking crack. I'm a crackhead, you know, um, and I discovered all of these drugs. Now, crack cocaine would not come into the picture until 2003, but around 1996 is when all the other drugs started. And I also developed a very strong affinity to opiates and Oxycontin. This is when Oxycontin was blowing up. And so athletics, remember they were important? No more. Academics, you remember they were important? Not anymore. Okay. Looking good for the family? Not anymore. None of that. I lied to my parents for an entire a couple of years. That I told them I was in school taking money, financial aid, their money. I had been kicked out of school. I was just living this lie and doing what we do. In my progression, now the consequences were starting, and now I was burning relationships. I was having to steal. I was having to lie. I was having to cheat. I started smoking crack in March or April 2003. I was selling large quantities of drugs. This is part of my story. And um, I had several ounces of cocaine at the house. A good buddy of mine comes over and he knows how to cook. And so he shows me how to cook cocaine. It's a freebase. And I felt like that was one of those moments in your life where you stand at a turning point. And all our turning points are rooted in surrender. That turning point just happened to be I was surrendering to cocaine, the freebasing of cocaine and crack cocaine. And my life began to fall apart. Bankruptcy. I lost the home. I was living out of hotels. Crazy, deviant sexual behavior when you're hanging out in a trap hotel with nothing but crackheads and dope fiends and prostitutes. This is where I spent all my time. And I was watching my life evaporate in front of me, and I was trying to sell drugs. My low point was when my own brother had to pull a gun on me because I had taken a bunch of cocaine from him and I smoked it all and I owed him a lot of money. You know, this is the depths to where my addiction took me to, where I had my brother, my own little brother, um, had to threaten my life. And, the downward spiral would continue. I'm a firm believer that God, whatever God is, it sends us angels, and sometimes the angels are God, and God shows up in our circumstances, and we call that surrender and our acknowledgement or acceptance of who we are and what we are. And God showed up. He always shows up. I sit in meetings sometimes. And I hear people say God showed up big time, but God's always there. He's always showing up. We just think he always shows up in the good stuff, and I'm telling you, he shows up in the bad stuff. That's where God, in my opinion, shows up and shows out, not the good stuff. It's in the valleys that I must take the master's hand and walk up the mountain. So, I mean, it was so obvious to me that this was God in my life. The funny thing is, the specific night when God showed up in my life, he looked like 5 police officers that had handcuffs and they arrested me. That's what God looked like on this specific night. I was arrested for drug trafficking, cocaine and drug trafficking ecstasy. These are very serious charges in the United States. I'm sure they're very serious where you're at. And I had been up for 6 days, no sleep, when I got arrested. And I remember, and I'm doing 280 milligram Oxycontin at this time. So the first like 4 or 5 days of my incarceration were brutal. But I remember sitting on the edge of the cot in the cell on the morning of November 5th, watching the sun come up. And I started going to 12 step. I started going to Cocaine Anonymous and AA in 2004. I get sober November of '07. I had 3 solid years of being a meeting maker. I went to big book studies. I went to big book studies at people's homes. I went to workshops. I went to meetings. I probably did 180 meetings in 90 days. I had good sponsorship. You can have all those things, but if you don't have the gift, and here's the cold, harsh reality, we cannot produce the gift of surrender. It's only God's mercy and maybe God's grace that gives that to us. And for me, the mercy and the grace look like this. Morning of November 5th in '07, I'm watching the sun come up, and this thought is injected into my consciousness. And I'm using those words deliberately because it wasn't Tarek sitting there obsessing about how he's going to get himself out of trouble, trying to come up with a way to manipulate someone to put up some bail money. It just exploded into my awareness. Today's your new sobriety date, and today's Jason's birthday. Now, Jason was one of my closest friends who died from a drug overdose on my birthday in 2003. Here I am 4 years later on the morning of November 5th. It's his birthday, my new sobriety date. And whatever God is, gave my sobriety date significant meaning in my life. What if that gave me just a little bit more willingness than I would have had if it had been November 7th or November 6th? Something that has stuck with me for 18 years, 4 months, and 19 days has been here. So I think that's a very important to know. And so as I'm sitting in this jail, I spent 5 weeks in this jail. Eventually, this gentleman who I was in that business with got me a lawyer. The lawyer he got me had been a police officer, had gone through law school, became a district attorney. Now he was working on the defensive side of things. So that was another God doing for me what I can't do for myself, because it's going to play a role in what happens after this. And you guys know, in our Middle Eastern cultures, and you lie. Like my parents would lie when they're and maybe they do this in all cultures, like I said earlier. But I know in my culture, growing up, you when you go to drug treatment, your parents say you're somewhere else. You didn't go seek drug treatment. Okay. You're off on some sabbatical somewhere or something. And they did that several times because I went to treatment several times between 2004 and 2007. I think by 2007, when I had been arrested, my family just gave up. They didn't want to talk to me on the phone. My brother didn't want to talk to me. My close friends didn't want to talk to me. Everybody thought I should rot in jail. That's the type of human being I had become. And so now I'm in this jail. It's a dangerous place. It's a very dangerous place I'm in. Someone was killed in the jail while I was in there those 5 weeks. And I was having verbal altercations every day. But I noticed this group of guys would go to the side of the pod, because after I'd been there for 4 or 5 days, my charges came through. They were so bad that they had to move me. They moved me to the 5th floor from the second floor. And so I went from DUIs, driving under the influence, and domestic violence, to rape and murder and all those charges. So I was in with all those people now. And so I noticed this group of guys have books, and they're walking to the corner of the pod. And so I followed them this one afternoon, and it turns out to be a Bible study. But that's not the important part. The important part here is when I was sitting in that little that little part of the pod, little cubby, curled up in a ball, listening, they said things that AA meetings had said. They said things that members of Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous had said at these meetings. I was being reminded not of organized religion, not about my upbringing with the mosque or the church. I was being reminded of Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous. I was being directed back. A power was taking care of me, and I wasn't even aware of it. I know that today. And maybe that's just perception. I don't know. But that's the way I choose to look at it, that God was stringing me along. I mean, he was doing everything for me. I mean, check this out. I can tell you with 18 and a half years that one of the greatest gifts, one of the greatest gifts God has done for me was make me a crackhead. The fact that I was born with this affliction, that it created desperation and thirst for God. It led me to God. God used it to send me on my way home. People outside of Cocaine Anonymous, outside of Alcoholics Anonymous, they're never going to understand why. They look at that as a liability. It's my greatest asset that I was hardwired this way. And I will never ever be a person that says, I can't believe I got to go to these meetings. I can't believe I got to work these steps. I'm only going to meet with this sponsee when it's convenient. I'm only going to do this prayer and meditation when I'm in trouble. No, no, no. This is not something I do to stay sober or clean. This way of life I do because I am clean and I am sober. This way of life I do is because it's the easiest way of life. It's the most beautiful way of life that I've ever known. I fell in love with Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous as soon as I got here. And maybe that's why it's been so easy for me to stay. It was the most welcoming place I've ever been, ever. No mosque, no church, no synagogue, no ashram. And I have spent time in all of those places I just listed. But there is something special about Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. It is my experience of the kingdom of God on earth. And it's always going to be like that for me. I pray. I pray. And I hope it's God's will that that is how my orientation towards this program and this fellowship is. It's given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, and it's given me a lot of darkness at the same time. I don't want anyone on this call to think just because you get clean and sober, it's trials and low spots. Bill Wilson promises them to us. And so let me circle back now. I'm in that jail. I'm going to the Bible studies now so I can hear the people. I read a couple of books that reference the 12 steps. It is clear as day that I'm being directed back to the steps. And then on top of that, there was an old timer. I mean, I say old timer. He had about 20 years when I got here. So he's closing in on 40 years now. And he was one of the guys whose house I used to go to for a big book study. And he used to do a big book workshop every week. And he was someone that people talked, they assassinated his character because he was so passionate about the big book. And he would always close the meeting on Friday night. It was a huge auditorium meeting, CA meeting in Atlanta, one of the bigger meetings in Atlanta, Georgia. And he would end the meeting like this on Friday nights. This is what I heard back then. If you're new, welcome, but you got nothing that we want. We encourage you to get a sponsor. We encourage you to join the home group. We encourage you to work these steps. We want you to make some amends, learn how to pray and meditate, start showing someone else how to do what I just listed. And then we want you to share all of that experience with us, all the experiences about the amends, all the experiences about prayer and meditation, all the experience about working with others. We would go outside the meeting and we would assassinate this man's character because we thought he was just some guy that was saying the same stuff over and over. But now I look back on it, oh my God, what a message of depth and weight that is. I'm in this jail and all I can think about is this man. He's in my mind. He's in my consciousness. And for some reason, I know that if I can find this guy, somehow he has something to do with the solution I've been looking for. Where does that come from? Why was I able to see the Bible study for what it was doing? It was pointing me to Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. What the sitting on the edge of that cot, new meaning for my sobriety date. Reading the two books and they mention the 12 steps. I'm seeing this guy who I didn't like, and now I'm saying to myself, I need to go find him. How does Tarek can't do that? That is the loving arm and hand of God. God had me in his hand the whole time, and I'm trying to squirm and get out. God had me wrapped in his hand the entire time. Remember, life is lived moving forward, but it's always understood in the rear view. So it's not like I knew what was going on in those experiences, but when I look back on it, oh my God, if I persist in this way of life, remarkable things will happen. Part of the remarkability is how the past changes. The past is not what it once was. I mean, what other arena in life allows you an opportunity to rewrite your story? Find one. Tell me about it. I have not been able to find one yet. And this is what gives us our calling. Outside of AA, outside of CA, these are all liabilities. We hide them. Just like I told you in growing up, we hide from the outside world. Now, this is what took me to my purpose. This is what took me to my calling. What is my calling? To use my experience to help other alcoholics and addicts, period. That's it. That's why God put me on this earth. That is my primary purpose on this earth. And I am grateful that I know that. We have this author in the United States. His name is Mark Twain. He said the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. The day you find out why. And I go through that experience in that jail, and they take me to my arraignment. And the day of the arraignment, I've got to go to the court. I have to be shackled at my wrists and my ankles, and they take us into the courtroom, and we have to stand before the judge. The lawyer comes, and my lawyer just happens to walk over to me, and I ask him, "Hey, man, have you spoken to my mother at all?" And he says, "Yes, she's right there in the gallery." Now, I'm the type of crackhead who's a foot soldier, who's doing the aimless walk at 3 or 4 in the morning, who's handing out in the abandoned crack houses. He's in the trap hotel. At this point, when I get arrested, I'm in a hotel. And I don't know, I can't tell you how long it's been since I've had a conversation, a meaningful conversation with my mother. And I turn in the courtroom, and it's almost like slow motion. My mom and my eyes meet in the courtroom. And for the first time, everyone, first time in my life, what was the big lie? Leave me alone. I'm not hurting anyone but me. Leave me alone. And for the first time in my life, I took a look at my mom, and she was frail. Her eyes were sunk in her head. She was pale, and her knees buckled in the courtroom. And for the first time, the lie was smashed. The lie that I was hurting no one but myself. I was destroying lives. Anyone that was caught in my blast radius was feeling the effect. And it hit me. But the interesting thing, it's like when Ebby walks in Bill's story, and Bill says, it was like Ebby was raised from the scrap heap. Something died, and he was given a new life. Something in that moment, everyone, in those entire 5 weeks, why were they experienced that way? I'd been in trouble before. I think I'd probably seen the eyes of people that I had hurt before when my mom found out I was lying about being in school, or when she found out about the money I stole. Why this time? Because of God's grace and God's mercy. Compassionate treatment bestowed upon a human being in distress. What does that look like? The voice of the liar goes into remission. Everyone on this call today, there's a voice. We have it. I have it. We all have it. It's a voice that lies to you. We probably have several voices, actually. We probably have like some type of personality disorder at the end of the day, but I don't know. But there are these voices that talk to us. Okay. And they all lie to us. They're very boring too, because they tell the same lies, right? She's going to leave. You're not good enough. You're not going to have enough money. You're a loser. You're not worthy. If they only knew what was going on inside of you, it tells the same story over and over and over. Pretty boring, right? But damn, they have a lot of power, don't they? So these voices, when we experience God's grace and God's mercy, the voices go into remission. They're going to come back. And I think when they come back is different for each human being. But we call that in the rooms of AA and the rooms of CA the window of grace. You know, we've always asked the question, why is this person's window so big and this person's window is so small? I think it has something to do with that voice coming back. And my voice went into remission for quite a while. And eventually they let me out of that jail and they allowed me to go to an inpatient treatment center for 90 days. And I got back into school and I got a job. And I went back to that meeting, the CA meeting on Friday night, and I found that man. And he spoon fed me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous for the next 2 years. Okay. In the big book on page 63 says, when we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things will happen. Okay. So I took the position that I was going to work the steps. I took the position that I was going to make amends. I took the position that I was going to get a home group. I took the position that I was going to hang out with people that had been sober longer than me. Because every time I'd gone to treatment before, I hung out with people that I was in treatment with. So if you take a damp log and you set it next to a group of logs that are on fire, it dries up and catches fire. And that's what I needed. I didn't know it. I didn't know where these ideas were coming from, but they were there and I was following the actions. I was taking the actions. And my attorney said I had 3 years in prison is what the best deal he could come up with. 3 years in prison. And I was terrified, man. I wanted a prison story, but I didn't want to go to prison, as my sponsor says. But I was terrified about it. And I would call my sponsor, and he would say, Tarek, say the fear prayer. God, remove my fear, direct my attention to what you would have me be. And he said, be of service, go be of service. And then he would tell me sometimes when I'd call and I'd say, Dante, man, I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to spend 3 years in prison. He'd say, you know what, Tarek, I will bet that there's someone in there you can carry the message to. And I hated when he said that because I know there probably somebody in there I can carry the message to. And this was the type of these were the suggestions that I was being given. And he gave me a guarantee though. He guaranteed me. He said, Tarek, listen, if you work these steps and give your life to Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't know what's going to happen to you. If you don't, something you don't like very much is going to happen to you. And that's the guarantee. And I said, okay, let me just work these steps and see what happens. And I documented my progress. I got drug screen passes every time I passed a drug screen. I got people in the program to write letters for me. I got, I was making good grades. I got my own apartment. I was working at the treatment center. And on a year into the case, back and forth, I get a call from my attorney one morning. I will never forget this. I'm in my little studio apartment right down the street from the treatment center. And my attorney says, Tarek, I do not understand what just happened. Somebody upstairs truly loves you. They dropped all the charges. Poof, vanished. No probation, no papers to get signed. How does that happen? Okay. Later on, I would have to make amends to former people that I was in the drug dealing business with. And a lot of them would not see me. They wouldn't answer my approaches. And I find out through other friends, they all thought I worked for the police. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to show up and tell my friends, hey, God did for me what I couldn't do for myself? That's what happened. That does not fly in that world. It doesn't make any intellectual sense how that happened. But I can tell you when I was in my little studio apartment, a part of the big book came to me. I think it's the forward to the first edition, I believe, maybe the preface. It says, we hope after reading these pages, no further authentication will be necessary. No further authentication will be necessary. I gave my life, I think, on that day again to God. I gave my life to Cocaine Anonymous and I gave my life to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I've never once taken it back. I am shocked when I see people work through the steps, have a vital spiritual experience, and then they don't give back. It breaks my heart, but that's their path. It breaks my heart, but that's their path. And so earlier I talked about that father. I want to end with this. I might go a minute or two over. Violent, abusive man, right? In my first fifth step, I had 16, 17 resentments towards my dad. He beat my mom. He put me and my brother in a position where we had to beat him up in high school. Um, I remember coming home from college and my dad had a black eye because my brother had to beat him up. I mean, it was like he forgot my birthday. He was an embarrassment. The list goes on and on. The first man that listened to my fifth step, he said he would ask me questions. Have you ever hurt anybody physically that you love? Have you ever forgotten someone's birthday that you love? Have you ever said you were going to be somewhere for someone you care about and you didn't show up? Have you verbally and emotionally been abusive to people you care about? Have you physically been abusive to people you care about? And I'm here to report to you, I answered yes to every single one of those questions. And during my fifth step, my head dropped. I had become my father. And for the first time, I was able to forgive my father because a sliver of compassion came into the door. I knew what my dad was suffering from. And so I went to make amends to my dad. I had not had a relationship with him from the age of like 16, 17, 18. I just removed him from my life. I'm 31 years old, probably 32 now when I'm going to make this amends. And I asked my dad what I could do to make it right. And he says, I want you to be happy and I want you to spend time with me. By this point, my mom has finally left my dad. They're divorced. My dad is drinking himself to death in a one-bedroom condo. So I start dating my father on Sundays. I take him to lunch. Then I start taking him to movie and lunch. And then I start taking him to dinner. The woman that I was married to that time thought it was really interesting about how much time I was spending with my dad. So she invites my dad to dinner. Then my mom finds out and she said, okay, invite your dad over to Sunday dinner. My mom's remarried at this point. My dad starts coming with me to Sunday dinner at my mom's house. Then he starts spending holidays with us. I fell in love with my father, the same man that beat me, the same man that I had to pull off my mom, the same man who I spit in his face. I spit in his face. This is the program and power of Cocaine Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous that God uses and how he uses them. And so in 2016, my father was diagnosed with cancer and I took him to all the chemo. And it came time where he didn't want to take chemo anymore, about a year into it. And he decides to come off the chemo and I'm taking care of my father. I'm the only family member he's got left that's willing to do that. And as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous and living life the way Alcoholics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous teaches us, my word, have integrity, be there. I became predictable. I became dependable. My mom and my stepdad invited me to take care of my dad for his transition in their home. One of my most powerful spiritual experiences is changing my dad's diaper with my stepfather and my stepdad looking up at both of us. Without all of you, without Alcoholics Anonymous, without Cocaine Anonymous, that experience would not have been available. I could not have held my dad when he took his last breath because he had no one else. But I was able to create a peaceful transition from my father. But he also showed me regret. He and I were clean. He couldn't say that about any other human being in his life. And so I believe this way of life is about preparing for that moment when death is going to find all of us. And that's what this is for me. I believe the greatest gift that God has given me is my recovery. And what I've done with my recovery is my gift back to God. And I hope God's as pleased with my gift to him as I am with his gift to me. I'm a member of Cocaine Anonymous. My name's Tarek.